You gotta wait in the parking lot. Yeah. So.
Good evening, folks. So we're still waiting on Lisa partially to join our group. Would there be any objection to me chairing in her absence for now?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Who are you?
We'll go ahead and get started then. So it's 5:33 and the Joint Animal Services Commission meeting will begin. I have an agenda. Can I get an approval on the agenda?
Edwards, so moved.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay. All right, so moving on, we have our March shelter statistics. Is that first on the agenda?
That's actually covered in the consent agenda.
Consent agenda.
So
Oh,
1 second, please. So since you started the meeting, you should have announced who you are. So that way, that is right onto the record. Because we know who the chairman is. If somebody else was doing it, we would have announced our name. So what is your name, sir?
I didn't understand.
Oh, he said you should have
What is your
introduced
name?
yourself.
Oh, okay. Let's go around the room. I'll start with our actual chair.
Hi, Lisa Parsley. Go ahead,
ahead.
Peter.
Did you? Okay, Peter, I got the city of Tumwater.
I'm Ed Kunkel, City of Lacey.
Joe McGugan, Feline Friends.
Vicki Smith, Deschutes Animal Clinic.
And Gary.
Gary Edwards, Thurston County.
Sadie Fidlin, City of Lacey.
And Sarah Hawk, Director for Animal Services.
Great. All right, do we want to move on to business items now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me get the screen up. We have two guests tonight. We have Ryan Andrews and Ashley Smith. They are going to be presenting on the latest updates and finding from the Capital Facilities Plan.
Or do you want to cue this up at all? No.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So, for starting last year, we were able to join the City of Lacey for their capital facilities plan that was basically looking at growth over the next 20 years, looking at buildings and services to see where we are currently at. And so in this time, it was where the city is at and where growth is going to be in the next 20 years. What was really great about this is since we were able to join, there's been some really, I don't necessarily want to call them great findings, but the findings that we have gone through when looking at the capital facilities plan and going through this exercise have been really enlightening, as well as kind of validating everything that we already knew about the building. So with that, I will hand it over to Ryan and Ashley.
Good evening, everybody. Ryan Andrews. I'm planning manager with the Community and Economic Development Department. I'm here with Ashley Smith from Capital Projects and our Public Works Department. And our hope tonight is that we're going to present some information that provides some recommendations that will be ultimately folded into our capital facilities plan, as Sarah mentioned. But ultimately, especially for the elected officials in the room, the purpose of this is to take this information back to your individual councils and commissions because it's has some fairly serious budget ramifications that are beyond the city of Lacey. So I think as we're all aware, the city of Lacey has a role in animal services as the property and building owner and you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, when it comes to funding a large project such as a new animal shelter, you know, that's a thing that we'll all have to lift together. And so keep that in mind as we go through kind of the findings in the report here tonight. So we were here about 6 months ago and gave you an update come on where we were at. And at that point, we had completed a needs assessment and had started looking at some alternatives. That was back in September. And since that time, we added a new phase to the project to explore some more near-term and cost-effective potential solutions, particularly here at City Hall, but also in animal services. And then are picking this back up for eventual adoption. Our hope is to get this in front of our city council by this summer. So this has been about a 2-year-long project, and we're starting to near the end. And this is where the rubber is starting to meet the road a little bit. And so again, we wanted to get your take on the information that we're providing tonight, and then in hopes that you'll also take this back to the boards and commissions and councils that you represent. So just as a reminder, this is an overall look at all the city facilities. So it includes our public works shop, our city hall, senior center, and White House, but it also includes animal services. So the figure you see on the screen right now is kind of a gross square footage number that has our basically where we're at today in terms of amount of square foot. That's the darkest blue, and in the chart there. The middle blue is the gap where our current needs are that are being underserved. So we have a facility for animal services that is currently underserved to meet current needs. And then the light blue at the very top is the future needs. So that's the needs of the next 20 years. So it's not only underserved to meet today, it's well underserved to meet future needs, and is functioning poorly. I'll mention that kind of some of the things that go along with that here in a little bit. So again, this is all of our city facilities, most of which are operating well. However, there are a couple that rise to the very top when we look at the condition of the facility as well as its function. Animal services gets the distinction of functioning the lowest, both for condition and function in the entire city's portfolio. So at the top, you can see our City Hall Police East Wing. So that's our current police department, which hopefully in the near future here within the next little bit, we'll be starting construction on a new facility across the parking lot from City Hall. And then animal services low on the condition scale, and then function low on the function scale is animal services, and then our White House, which is a park facility located at the Woodland Creek Community Park. Animal services obviously was not a purpose-built structure. It was the old Washington natural gas facility that was purchased and converted later. And so again, its function is not the best when it comes to animal services. Provide you some cost estimates that go along with the presentation tonight. It's important to note that these costs are provided in 2023 dollars. And the important thing with that is our costs are increasing essentially quarterly at this point. So, you know, it used to be that we would have to take into account kind of what cost increase would be on an annual basis. And right now they're going up so fast that I think our capital projects teams is looking at them almost on a quarterly basis. And so keep that in mind as the years roll on, cost of construction will get even more expensive going forward. Did want to make mention that our estimates for the construction that we're going to be providing here tonight provide about 30% soft costs. So soft costs are things like design and those kinds of things. Things that are also unforeseen, things like contingencies and that kind of stuff. So there's a fairly big inflator in there that is I'll say, for lack of a better term, a buffer. So because at this point really we're at such a high level that we don't know exactly what those construction costs are going to be, but as this project progresses and as you refine your design and those kinds of things, it'll become clear what the exact amount of construction would be. Also, we included a 7% in that soft cost figure for things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So let's talk about what those recommendations are. And again, I mentioned probably most of this already. The key findings coming out of the animal services section of our capital facilities plan is that this is not a purpose-built facility, and the dog kennels, et cetera, do not meet industry standards of care. Sarah wanted me to underline this one, so it's really important. Staff and operations have outgrown the facility and only minimal relief has been provided by the new veterinary clinic and the leased trailer. So, you know, we're lacking. Anybody that takes even a short trip to animal services knows the crunch that the staff's under and working on top of each other, and rooms that were designed for one purpose have now totally been used for another. And you know, the good news is that there is the modular facility, the vet clinic in the back and that leased trailer. But you know, it only provides minimal relief to what's needed as far as operations within the building. It's also important to note that there's a concern for staff by the activity adjacent to the building. So that is related to the homeless activity down Martin Way. And about a year ago, there was a body found behind the facility. So there's general concerns for safety and security around the facility today. As well, some of the utilities in the building are starting to fail or have failed and are requiring significant investment to maintain. I think a recent sewer line project was a result of that. So again, you know, the building is starting to fail and things need to be done to shore that up. Ashley will talk a little bit here about some of those costs that we're going to be facing here in the short term. Long term, though, the recommendation is to construct a new shelter that includes a full modern suite of things that a modern animal services shelter would require, things like administrative and staff areas, kennels, veterinary services that are within the building and not in a modular trailer in the back, with treatment and isolation, storage, shop areas with laundry and grooming, as well as covered outdoor exercise space with storage as well. So all that, we used kind of what the existing facility is now and took that projection we'll be looking at in the next 20 years and ran that through a cost estimation of about $20 to $24 million in the existing location there on Martin Way. So that means if the existing building essentially is kind of allowed to operate in the interim and you were to construct a new facility on the site and demolish the old one, that cost would be about $20 to $24 million. As I mentioned before, there's still some safety and security concerns with that facility, especially located in its proximity to some of the activity along Martin Way. So we were tasked by animal services staff to actually potentially look at a new location. And if you were to factor in what a new location would cost, that's about $22 to $26 million for a new location. We did reach out to our a property broker friend that did give us an estimate that the existing facility is worth about $1.7 million. So and a new property would be about $3.5 million. So round numbers, that pushes our cost estimate up about $2 million for a new property if we were able to come out kind of netting owing about $2 million for a new property. Talking to the broker, they did say that the animal services building itself is essentially not usable for anything else. So it's not that we can, market the building as something. It's really such a, the facility was an office building, and then it was converted to animal services. There's really no other easy use to plug and play within that building. So really, it's the value of that is in the property. And when they're looking at this, really they're thinking it could be something like more kind of multifamily housing. So something along those lines, that the property would be used for rather than something that would be more commercial. There's also some proximity to some wetlands that are on the north side of that site that limit some of the constructability on that site. So animal services staff said, hey, we need about 2.5 acres of property to be able to put this somewhere else. She gave us comps. So our broker friend gave us comps of about $30 a square feet for similar properties elsewhere in the community. So keep that in mind, $30 a square foot, equals for that size of property, about $3.5 million. However, there is not that size of property available on the market right now. So while the property is, that's what property could cost for that amount, for about 2.5 acres of commercial property within kind of the Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater area, the current property is not available. So that's something to keep in mind too, is a lot of that depends on the specific property coming available on the market.
Seems like the current property is pretty good location, more or less. I mean, easy access to it. I don't think the location of the property is an issue, do you?
The location itself, I mean, it's very centralized.
Yeah.
The problem comes is that it's actually 5 acres, but only 2.5 are usable.
Mm-hmm.
We've also outgrown that with the expansion and annexation of different things. The cities of Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey have actually taken over a great number of agricultural areas that we're now responsible for addressing livestock, and we don't have the ability to house livestock. And so it comes with some give and take. If we're going to stay on a property this size, we could potentially build on it, but then we're going to have to relook at what services are being provided, because we cannot actually continue to house some of the stuff. Like, we don't have the ability to house livestock on site. We shouldn't. And so if we're going to stay on a property like that, we will need to continue to reevaluate and say, hey, cities of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, we will no longer do any livestock calls or housing for you because we don't have the facilities to do it.
What about a location in South County?
It could be a possibility. We were trying to stay somewhat centrally located when we were just doing this estimate. Now, keep in mind, this is just kind of rough overarching estimates and not saying that we can't be one place over another. But we're also trying to keep factors in, such as the fact that City of Lacey is still required to maintenance this building. And so if we go to the South County, who will be maintaining that? Will it still be the City of Lacey driving down to maintenance it, or is that a whole different negotiation? So there's so many other factors, and this is just kind of the overarching analysis to get us started.
I wasn't even aware that we were responsible for livestock. That's news to me. I had no.
We are not in the county. The sheriff's office is responsible in the county, but we are responsible for livestock in the cities. It's written into municipal code right now.
Interesting.
Sarah, you said 2.5 acres. Is that negotiable, or is that overestimation or underestimation?
That's an under. I would prefer more. 2.5 acres is what we're using of our 5 right now, but we cannot utilize any more because of how it sits, either proximity to wetlands, and then the rest of our property actually goes up a hill, which actually has then residences on top of that hill. So you can't dig into it without worrying about infrastructure of the housing on top, to be honest.
We're assuming a new 2.5 acre site would be a 2-story building.
Right. Yeah. And that is assuming that we would need to build up. So if we do a 2.5, then the shelter is being built up vertically as well, and trying to think in terms of how that operates.
Okay, that's useful, because it might be interesting to have our jurisdictions look at the jurisdiction properties and see what we have in holdings to see if there's any that would fit this bill that the cities are sitting on or the county's sitting on.
Yes, that would be. There are, I think, a couple of properties that are either jointly jointly owned or other jurisdictions potentially do own, that, you know, we would love to hear about.
I'll keep that in mind.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
About up where the old courthouse is.
Well, so here's the thing, we can throw out conjectures all we want to right now. This is just the overarching plan. That basically the capital facilities plan has come in and said, hey, they can't operate in this facility anymore as is. So the next steps will actually be what you guys have already approved in the budget, which is then to do the feasibility study that will drill down further. And that will go into more detail, a lot of these considerations. So I don't want us to get fixated on, you know, looking at properties tonight per se. You know, I'd like us to make sure that we get through kind of talking about what's going on between the capital facilities plan as well as Ashley's findings when her team went in and actually like assessed the building.
All right, so Ashley will talk in just a second about the facility condition assessment that the city completed for the building, which provides even a finer grain of detail than what we're doing through the capital facilities plan, which is fantastic because it really informs this process. But I did want to give the board kind of some ideas of what we explored when we looked at some interim options. So as I mentioned, we initially were looking at a brand new facility and we said, wait a second, are there some more kind of budget friendly options that would allow us to get just a little bit more out of that building and the grounds in the short term? And so we looked at other options. None of them became very feasible because operationally they were challenging. And so things like putting, we've got this example of a modular kennel structure that you could put potentially in, you know, the back area near the vet trailer that you've got there now, putting a staff, you know, a new staff modular building in that area as well to free up staff space. So, you know, things like kennels, things like staff space, they allow you to move out of the building some of these functions and then remodel the internal part of the building to get more use out of that for things like, you know, storage and ISO spaces and other things. So it does allow you to make some renovations to the main facility. It is fairly budget friendly, but operationally it just wasn't feasible. As well, we also looked at constructing a new dog operations facility, a brand new building, essentially next to the existing animal services structure where the coffee stand is. So again, looking at, okay, what is feasible? Well, maybe we could do another standalone building where you move all of your dog operations into that. So you have kind of a cat side and a dog side. Again, you know, it created a lot of logistical issues to have a facility separated in functions with two separate buildings. And then as well, the infrastructure on the site, as we all know, is not great. And it's difficult to try to, you know, get things to like, you know, water and sewer lines back on that north end, is that north end of the property to service all that. So all that to say, we did go through and analyze these different options, but it became apparent that really we may be throwing good money after bad on this one, that we really need to focus on getting a new facility and putting, you know, our resources towards that versus trying to make, you know, something work the next 5 years or so on a building that and on a site that just is incredibly difficult to get to function well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley. Ashley can talk about some of those things that were identified in the building. And again, some of those high ticket dollar items that are going to cost some money here in the not too distant future to look at addressing just on keeping the existing building going. So Ashley.
All right, thank you, Ryan. All right, so the city hired a consultant to come in and do a detailed condition assessment of all of our facility portfolio and bring on an asset management program so we can be really intentional and strategic with our maintenance dollars. And so the animal services facility was one of our buildings in our portfolio in this project. So Bureau Veritas came in and did a detailed assessment of all the systems, from sewer, plumbing up to the roof and every component in between. And then provided a life cycle cost analysis of what those repairs would be based on their condition. That assessment identified the current facility condition at a, excuse me, make sure I have the terminology correct here. At a fair rating, which is the second lowest at about 16%. And what that means is that there are significant repairs needed, some critical in nature. And those were identified in roughly the $500,000 cost mark. It's important to note, though, that several that were identified there required further study, such as plumbing, electrical, HVAC systems, et cetera. And so some of that we've already begun work on with the sewer repair, and then others will be picking up as part of the next phase with a more detailed assessment. So that's not a complete representation of the costs needed there. And then the next important piece to note is that within the by the third year, right, 2026, the facility's condition will be such that it's now in poor or failed condition based on lack of improvement. So the total cost impact within the next 5 years just to maintain it in its inoperable condition is about $1.6 million, without identifying, more detailed code upgrades and those types of things. So these are arguably dollars that would be better served looking towards the future, and keeping the building operating while we bring a new facility online. We have noted here $500,000 is budgeted for this year to do some of those urgent repairs, and at that point includes the sewer line repair, which was just completed, some exterior lighting upgrades for safety, and new dog kennels. But the one identified in the report that is not planned or budgeted at this time is the roof repair, which is significant. So as you can see on this graph, every year that those costs and maintenance items are deferred, the condition worsens and the cost impact becomes greater. And also the other thing to note, there are things that once you start digging into, you can't stop. So if we start repairing electrical, then that means the entire building needs to get. So they're like, it's like small that then escalates into much larger.
There's nothing in there you can just put a Band-Aid on, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Get it?
So I was going to ask, because we had that problem with our jail in Olympia. We started doing this kind of assessment, and we started doing the repairs, and we realized that there is no repair. We will spend so much money that it is ridiculous, and it'd be a new building. Is that possible on this building?
That is the current condition of the building, yes. Without significant investment, the building is failing and has a useful life of about 5 years. And so basically, what it's saying is that we can still invest all this, and at the end of the 5 years, it's still not useful. So we could fix every single thing in that building for $1.2 million, and it's just to maintain it as is. It's not actually like it will not extend its life. It's just repairing the things that should have been repaired years ago. You're not improving any of the functionality or correct like that.
Gary, I
So-
Gary has his hand
so-
up.
So,
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm sorry. So if I hear us correctly, I'm scratching my head to figure out why are we talking about renovation, doing this and doing that, when our bottom line is it's just not feasible to do anything because it's not going to work. This is 2023. By 2026, that building is not working. I mean, it's not going to be able to do what it's supposed to do. So why even bring up all of those plans when we know that's not, I mean, that this is not going to work. We should be talking about identify an area, how much we're willing to spend and what we're willing to do to put in the building, because clearly this building is not going to stand in the next 5-8 years. It's done.
Well, and I would say that's part of why we're having this conversation is so that we have to do our due diligence as a responsibility to the taxpayers, that we're basically doing this due diligence to say, hey, we've looked at every possible angle, every possible way that we can be fiduciary responsible with taxpayer dollars, whether that's renovating the current facility, fixing the facility, getting a new facility. Part of our responsibility is to do that due diligence. So when we do make that decision, we do it with as much data and information as possible so that we know we're making the best decision for the county, for the animals, and for the taxpayers. That's why we're doing this.
I have a question. So your commercial real estate friend that you talked to, was that person privy to any available building that could be sufficient for what we're looking for?
Anything that was on the market is what they were looking at.
Yeah, and did they tell you of any particular building that could function as an animal
No,
shelter?
There were sites that were about an acre.
Okay.
So they were looking at, essentially kind of general commercial type sites where, permitting would be, easy. So they weren't looking at residential property. They were
Right.
looking at available, and they said, they could find stuff for about an acre. But in order to get something that's about 2.5 acres, we'd have to aggregate together multiple parcels to be able to do that. So there was nothing of that size in northern Thurston
Available for
County.
sale.
Correct, yeah.
Even in South County?
They weren't looking at South County. So the thing is that, again, we went on the premise that the city of Lacey would continue to maintain the future building.
Right.
So we can't, say, hey, let's go down to Grand Mound with our staff.
Right.
And so we looked at anything that was in Lacey, the Lacey urban growth area, or within a 10-minute drive of the current facility.
So we need to expand that search then.
And or if we do, then I think, and this is a topic that Sarah could help you on and not myself, is that there would need to be discussions about what's the city of Lacey's role in maintaining a future facility if it's going to be so far outside of the area that we do maintenance, because at some point, it doesn't necessarily become very feasible for us to continue.
It seems like the focal point of interest is improving the condition first and foremost.
Yeah, and it may also, before we start talking about properties, like I said, we should probably also look at the inventory in the different jurisdictions, because we have property that will not be listed. The other thing is we have to have conversations about what's the future of Joint Animal Services. Is it as a public entity, or is it a 501c3 that the public entities contract for? There's a lot of conversations that I think we need to probably speed up, Sarah. But more, Gary's had his hand up. I want to make sure Gary gets a chance.
I guess, Lisa, I'll just follow up on what Peter was talking about. And eventually, or sooner than eventually, I guess, we need to think about the funding mechanism that might fit in, and how we go about that. Would it be a levy lift or a bond issue, or how would we go about funding this if, and it sounds like we need to do something sooner than later. So before we get too far down the road, or all the entities will have to be in some kind of negotiation about the funding mechanism that this might need to be put together.
Yeah, Commissioner Edwards, you're absolutely correct.
Right. I agree. Gary, good point.
I just have like 2 more slides and then we can continue
And
discussion.
then we can
Great.
let
Yep.
Ryan and Ashley go on their way.
Well, no, you guys great discussion, all great points. I just want to finish things out and then I can stop sharing my screen and you can have a discussion. So again, just a reminder, there were some interim solutions that we did look at that all presented operational challenges. The staff ultimately would like to relocate, as I mentioned, because of safety concerns and operational issues. And given the facility condition results that Ashley mentioned, and staff relocation preference, additional investment in the current site as it is right now is not warranted if we're looking at relocation or construction here at the new facility fairly soon. So ultimately recommendations and things that we need to do here in the short term, look at the space needs and address those essential repairs. Look at potentially acquiring around a 2-acre site, about 2.5-acre site, and construct a modern animal services center. If we're unable to do that within an appropriate time frame, then look at how we develop a plan for operations during construction and build a facility at the current location on the existing property. And then finally, look at a funding strategy, which was just mentioned, for further design and construction, and go from there. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you for any questions. Like I mentioned, this is going to go to our city council by this summer. And so these recommendations will be folded into that, not to mention, what happens with, your decisions and moving this forward and talking, like I said, to your individual commissions and councils on how you might be able to fund the project and start working through all those kind of issues that you've already started bringing up. So that.
Can we get an email of the slides?
Yeah, I'll email it to Sarah and then she can shoot it out to you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's a great idea.
And then what we are asking is that, especially the appointed jurisdictional representatives, to take this back to your prospective councils or commissions to let them know kind of what these findings are. I will tie in my yearly presentations that I do for the jurisdictions to update, kind of starting after this, hopefully in June, after you guys have had a chance to bring it to them. I can schedule my yearly presentation with the jurisdictions for, when we do our general update, to then talk about what some of these new findings are.
Perfect. I think if I might make a suggestion, we usually have a retreat. Maybe we do the retreat after you go to the jurisdictions instead of before, and then really focus on what does this look like 1 to 5 years joint animal services. And because Gary's right and Ed's right and Peter's right, the jurisdiction's going to have to make a decision about the future of JASCOM. And there's so many things on the table for so many jurisdictions right now financially. So
we also might need to get creative in our thinking of how we fund it, and even looking outside of different things that have been funded, not just animal shelters, but other joint jurisdictional buildings that have happened recently. It might be good to inquire with any of them how they were able to work those parameters out through multiple jurisdictions. So keep that in mind too. If you come across something, please by all means send it to me, because we can then reach out and discuss how that funding was procured to help give us a better idea of what we're looking at.
excellent. Is there anything else for the commission?
Really quick, we talked about next steps. We do have on the horizon in the short term, bringing on another consultant for a more in-depth space needs analysis and some preliminary concept designs. They'll be very, very conceptual, but that will inform some of the funding discussions that we'll need to support the facility design and construction.
Okay, it's very good. I don't know if Ed's in charge or me, but if I was me, I
Go
would
ahead,
be
Lisa, I'm
going-
gonna let you have it. I just didn't want to be late getting the meeting started.
No, I appreciate that, Ed. Zoom failed me tonight, so I have no problem with that. You did not insult me in any way. Director's report.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Did you come with better news?
Give me 1 second to share my screen and we'll get going on the director's report. All right, so I have some mundane stuff to update you guys about, and then I have some less mundane items to update you all on. So first and foremost, the sewer repair is done.
Yay.
As you can see, we now have multi-patterned, multicolored flooring. In some places, we're now on our third color of vinyl. And in the lobby, we have a lovely wood style accent that now runs a stripe through the lobby where the sewer line was repaired. But in this case, we cannot be choosers because it was either pick what they had or wait multiple weeks, if not more of a month, before we could get the flooring reinstalled, which meant working bathrooms as well. So beggars cannot be choosers in this instant. And we are so far, everything's been working great. We did have one incident a week later where a pipe burst in our kitchen and water was coming up through the floor, but just so happened the plumbers were there doing a little extra repair and they came and fixed that as well. We've had a couple of really exciting things happen. So we were invited to participate in a program called Dogs Playing for Life, which is a great nonprofit that trains organizations to do play groups for dogs. It's actually a life-saving program because it gets them out, mentally stimulates them, and they get to have fun with other dogs. So two of our staff actually went to be trained to learn how we could possibly bring some of these concepts back to Joint Animal Services. They came back really excited with some amazing ideas that we've been sitting down and sifting through to see what can be done now, what might we have to do in the next year or two to get something like that up and running. We also had visits from the Dulciani Halloran Foundation trustees. They came to tour the medical suite because, as you guys remember, they donated $55,000 to the completion of the medical suite and to purchase dental equipment. After their visit, we received an additional, it was a surprise, additional $10,000 to fund medical procedures and to buy any supplies having to do with those medical procedures, pay for relief veterinarians, etc., in the new building. So they were highly impressed with everything that we had done. They were impressed with the breadth of services provided by us. And the operation appears to be well organized for being so diverse. They also stated that they would be open to an additional grant this year to fund a program. And so we will now be walking through and talking with them about some of our programs that would possibly be funded. And to the more interesting portion of tonight's director's report is to talk about a case that we had starting last week. It actually, I should say, started several weeks ago when the person who owned these cats came to us asking for help. The process was sped up because she was evicted. We had to do some negotiations between her as well as the landlord. She signed all the cats over to us. The landlord gave us permission to enter the property. And on Wednesday, we pulled 115 cats out of that house. Since Wednesday, we have pulled additional cats for a total of 140 cats, 47 cats and kittens that have come from that property. So this is one of the larger hoarding cases that we have had in a very long time. It has put us well over capacity. We are now sitting on 176 animals in-house when we should only be housing 95. We have 64 animals in foster. Thankfully, the team and our foster, so the day we went out, our volunteer and foster coordinator was actually like reaching out to fosters, just not giving detailed information, but saying, we need to know who can take cats, how many, can you take adult cats? Can you take a mom with babies? Can you take neonates? Like, what can you take? And so by the time we got back from the property, we had 40 animals already claimed. So that was really helpful. About 30 cats have been transported off-site to other shelters and rescues, but it's not nearly enough. So we are struggling a bit, to be quite honest. The staff are managing for now, but we will not be able to maintain at this level for very long, both for the staff's sake as well as the animal's sake. It's not a practice standard of care. And we are actually violating our capacity for care right now with this many animals in the building. So we have reached out to the community. We've asked people to step up, to sign up to become a foster, to sign up, become a volunteer, come on in and help us start cleaning and caring for these animals. And if they cannot, to come in and adopt, if they are looking for a furry animal. And then if they can't do that, to donate, whether it be cash or gift cards or purchasing cat and kitten food, as well as litter boxes and litter, so that we can continue to care for these animals.
Is it out of place to see if other shelters could help absorb that?
We've already been asking and
I'm
we've
sure,
only gotten
yeah.
30.
Mhm.
It's been very frustrating, to say the least. We've probably reached out to almost 50 organizations.
Sarah? I don't know if this is crazy, and Vicky can agree or disagree with me, but have you reached out to the vet clinics? There might be some capacity there that in kennels that we have, 1 or 2 here, 3 or 4 there, because there's over 40 vet clinics in the Thurston County region.
We can try. I'm open to trying. The clinics take stuff all the time for us, especially when they're dire medical cases. So we can reach out and we can try. Yeah, I was on site that day. I went with the team because Sierra and myself, so our new field supervisor and myself, are the only ones that have experience with these types of cases. And so we used it as a training exercise for the team.
And this was a rental?
This was a rental.
Oh, boy.
Yep. We will probably still be catching more cats through the next couple of weeks because we're down to the ones that we were not able to collect ourselves. The good news from this situation is that probably more than 90% of them are friendly. We only have about 10 cats so far that are in poor medical condition that's going to require some extra medical. The majority of them are just underweight and were dehydrated, which is not unexpected. We have had some great coverage. King 5 came down and covered the case and talked about what our needs are. I also talked with the Olympian today, and they will be running an article as well. But I wanted to keep you guys updated because to date, this is one of the larger cases that we've had.
Reach out to my clinic there at the ER. We may have at capacity for some.
At OVS?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Have all the animals been evaluated by a vet, or do they get any vet care?
They have not all been evaluated by a vet yet. We've been working, one of our relief vets came on Friday and looked at some of the more dire, but we're slowly working through, and it's hard to get appointments for everybody.
So you have kittens?
All the way from neonates,
Okay.
all the way up to almost of an age to be adopted. We have juveniles that are like 6 months old, 8 months old to fully adult. It spans the whole gamut. Thankfully, a lot of the nursing moms they've taken, we're pretty sure, kittens that aren't even theirs. We've been able to match up some of similar ages, or ones that we pulled that have milk but didn't necessarily have any babies with them, and they've been taken right to taking care of them, so that's helped too.
Did your officers have a chance to document everything and, identify every cat and have all of it done?
They're working on we worked through that whole process. We used it as a training exercise. We documented conditions, we videos.
Weights.
Yep.
Identity.
Yep, we're going through getting weights, and kind of going through that general assessment. It's just taking a while because our field team is not fully staffed. And we are a small operation. And so on top of, bringing in the 115 cats that day, the team was also caring for the other animals in the facility. So it's a slower, unfortunate process that's also inhibited by the fact we don't have a vet yet.
Do you have any availability like Sundays to do any of that?
The team is minimally staffed, but we could probably work it to figure something like that out. Are you asking because you're offering?
Yes.
Okay.
You could look at Sunday.
I'd come help too. Vicky could tell me what to do.
Yeah. No, I'll reach out to you guys tomorrow and get some availability, and then we'll work figuring out with staff what needs to be done. So we are probably going to be referring charges, most likely only on the ones that were left behind because those were technically abandoned. The ones that she willingly brought to us beforehand that were in good condition, there's really no reason to add those to the list. But given the conditions of the house and stuff, we're working through and working with TCSO because it's their territory on what charges we're moving forward with.
But for an overall assessment of all the conditions, like having how many were dehydrated, how many are underweight, how many have, dermatitis from fleas, how many of the ones that overall that appear to have signs of neglect, that's really helpful for your case.
It is, absolutely. I agree. And I'm going to end on a happier note, guys. So we have a really lovely happy tale. This is Scooby. Scooby was actually tied outside our facility with a note, basically just saying that he's 8 years old and possibly hostile and growls at people. He was so stressed out and scared that he actually chewed through his leash and ran off, and we had to trap him. So we caught it all on video is how we know. So we were able to trap him. He had lots of skin issues. Turns out he needs special food. And he did need a dental. He spent some time in foster. When he came back, he was not doing well in the shelter at all. He was going down rather quickly. And so we started bringing him up to the front desk. That's Becca. She's one of our customer service specialists. She got rather attached to him. And so he was adopted last week with everything going on. Scooby got adopted to a lovely retired postal worker who goes on multiple walks a day. And his owner happily reported that he's claimed the recliner as
That's
his.
cute.
That is his recliner.
Very nice, very nice.
And with that, let me stop sharing my screen.
I love those.
That is the director's report. That's it for me today.
Do you have any tabby cats that are young in that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we got lots of tabbies,
Okay.
lots of brown tabbies, orange tabbies, lots of tuxedos.
I know if I go down there, I'll end up taking one home.
You should come.
You should take
You
one.
You should go take one, Ed.
I
That's
have a
good.
cat at home. I don't know if my cat's gonna like a new cat.
Rick was not, did not appreciate my suggestion that every City of Lacey employee gets. I mean, I have to.
That's not a bad idea.
Year-end bonus.
Yeah.
I would do it.
See, I already got a taker.
You could
She
do-
thinks it's a great idea.
4 cats at my desk. He's
There you go.
And Ed, you could go to council and guilt the rest of council into taking one.
And that's not a bad idea. You want to bring me a tame cat for
You know,
council on Thursday?
I have kitten tents. I could set up a little tent in here
We could
with
just get it
netting
here.
for them to,
Ken Balsley's dedicate his, we're giving him the Spirit of Lacey, well, posthumously, we're giving him the Spirit of Lacey Award. And there's gonna be a lot of people here, from what I understand, in council on Thursday. So that might be a golden opportunity to bring in some furry friends to pass around, and maybe they'll end up going home with people.
That's a
That
great
might-
idea, Ed.
Yeah,
I will reach out to Rick tomorrow, or if you want to reach out to Rick
I
tomorrow.
would love the idea of sitting behind the dais and these little kittens running around across, we're playing with. I don't think the mayor would appreciate it, but I don't know. I mean, I think it would be adorable, but that's just
I think
me.
it'd be great.
Yeah.
I could see the Olympian article. Um,
There you go.
Gary,
Yep.
your hands up, Gary.
How are we doing now? Can you hear me now, Lisa?
Can hear you.
Okay. I had one question about the placement of the new facility as we just think about the needs in the future. What is the requirement as a general rule as far as the barking issue and placement, close to residential or a business park? I don't know what it would be, but there must be some history that we can tread out somewhere from those that have done this before us.
Yes,
How
no,
close
there-
can this work out to, residential versus other or rural? How does that work?
No, absolutely. And that is one of those things that we have to take into consideration upon placement, because we don't want to be bad neighbors.
So
And there are actual code things that we do need to look at. So, for example, if we stay within the cities, we have to abide by the same codes the city set. So for example, no roosters, even though we get roosters a lot. So, it's one of those that we have to be mindful about where we are positioned. We are in a place that we are good neighbors, that we're not going to, bother anybody around us, but that we're also abiding by the actual municipal codes outlined by the jurisdiction we're in.
Yeah, I suppose it'll just be another restriction that we'll have to figure out. Okay, thank you.
That's why I think
Good
South
question,
County,
Gary.
we should really consider South County.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not opposed, Ed. I think that goes to the larger question we talked about, though. It depends upon where we go, if Lacey's the primary or we become a 501c3. I think that
Primary in that event, but we got to think about what's best for, where is the best place for an animal shelter? What would be the best practice? And we talk about livestock, talk about roosters.
yeah. Nope, you're absolutely right, Ed. I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Is there anything for the good of the order?
Lisa, I would have just one other quick question, just thinking about
Sure.
placement, what we might be doing in the future. Is there a proper temperature, like we all like 72 degrees when we're say in an office setting, but what's the proper temperature for a living area for kennels, whether it's cats, dogs, whatever? I mean, is it the same, or is that too warm and it needs to be 56 or what? I don't know. I just don't know the answer. So I would think it might come into play when we think about the cost of heating a facility and when we design it. Maybe somebody's already figured that out. I don't know.
There are actual architects that specialize in designing animal shelters and other facilities like that. And so they take all of that into consideration. And as well as like standards of care, all outline what that looks like and what we should be abiding by.
Okay, that was it for me. Thank you.
Another good question, Gary. Okay, if there's nothing for the good of the order, I'm going to adjourn this meeting and we will reconvene in June. Thank you, everybody.